Today, we are diving into one of the most brutal, dramatic, and legendary rebellions in the entire history of the Roman Empire. We're talking about the story of Boudica, the warrior queen of ancient Britain. I mean, that one sentence just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the raw fury of her story. This is a tale of resistance so fierce, it came incredibly close to kicking the Romans out of Britain for good. So, to really understand the absolute firestorm she unleashed, we have to look for the spark. And it all started with a deeply personal and calculated act of humiliation. Okay, so to get the full picture, you gotta rewind to Britain around 60 AD. Boudica was the queen of a tribe called the Iceni, and they had a very special and very fragile deal with Rome. So basically, Boudica's husband, King Prasutagus, was walking a tightrope. He was allowed to rule his own people, but at the end of the day, Rome was the boss. It was a shaky peace, right? An attempt to keep his people's identity while just acknowledging Roman power. He even thought he had a plan to protect his family after he was gone. He was so wrong. What's so crucial to get here is that the king's will wasn't just a family matter. It was a diplomatic move. But Rome, well, they saw it as an open invitation to just take everything. They didn't just seize the kingdom, they systematically tore apart the royal family's dignity, flogging a queen, raping her daughters. These were not random acts of cruelty. No, this was a political statement designed to break the spirit of the Iceni people. And you have to remember, this personal horror landed on a powder keg that was already about to blow. The Iceni were being stripped of their land and their wealth. Their neighbors were being shoved aside to make room for Roman army vets. And to add the ultimate insult to injury, they were forced to pay for a massive temple glorifying the very emperor who had conquered them. The Romans had just pushed way too far. So in response to all this, did Boudica just grieve? Nope. She rose. She became the rally point for every single Briton who had suffered under Roman rule. And she unleashed a storm of vengeance that would shake the province to its absolute core. So where did they aim their rage first? Right at Camulodunum, a settlement for retired Roman soldiers, the very symbol of their conquest. It was barely defended, and Boudica's army showed zero mercy. They overran the town and burned it to the ground. You know, to this day, archaeologists can still find a thick, black layer of ash from that attack. Next on the list, the bustling commercial hub of Londinium. Now, the Roman governor, a guy named Suetonius Paulinus, was racing to deal with the threat, but he knew he couldn't defend the city. So he made a brutal choice, sacrifice Londinium to save his army. The city and everyone in it were left to Boudica's wrath, and they suffered the exact same fate as Camulodunum. And they didn't stop there. The rebel army then marched on Verulamium, another major Roman town, and completely leveled it. In a stunningly short amount of time, the three most important Roman centers in Britain had just been wiped off the map. The scale of the slaughter was just staggering. The Roman historian Tacitus wrote that the rebels took no prisoners, they just butchered everyone in their path as an act of pure revenge. This wasn't just a rebellion, it was an annihilation. But, and this is a huge but, while Boudica's army was running on pure rage, Governor Suetonius Paulinus was regrouping. He had kept his professional legions safe, and now he was getting ready to pit cold, hard Roman discipline against the Britons' wild fury in one final, decisive battle. Just look at the matchup here. On one side, you have Boudica with a massive numbers advantage. We're talking at least 10-1, but her army was a passionate, disorganized horde. On the other side, Paulinus has this tiny but elite force of professionals, absolute masters of formation fighting, led by a battle-hardened general. It was a classic clash of quantity versus quality. Paulinus knew he couldn't win a straight fight, so he chose his battlefield with surgical precision. The location is believed to be somewhere along a Roman road called Watling Street, where the terrain itself would become his greatest weapon. So how did he pull it off? Well, it was a tactical masterstroke. First, he picks a narrow valley, which totally neutralizes the Britons' numerical advantage. They couldn't surround him. Next, as this massive horde charges forward, the legions unleash a devastating volley of heavy javelins, shattering the British front line. Then came the Roman specialty. They advanced in their famous wedge formation, basically a killing machine designed for close-quarters combat. And the final tragic irony, the Britons had brought their families in wagons to watch what they thought would be an easy victory. Those same wagons now blocked their only escape route, turning the battlefield into a death trap. The result was an absolute catastrophe for the Britons. While Roman casualties were only in the hundreds, an estimated 80,000 Britons were killed. The rebellion, which had burned so brightly, was extinguished in a single, brutal afternoon. And what about Boudica herself? Well, her final moments are a bit of a mystery. The Roman accounts don't agree. Did she choose her own death by poison, one final act of defiance? Or did she simply die of illness, her body broken by the devastating defeat? We'll probably never know for sure. So the revolt was crushed. End of story, right? Not even close. In fact, her real story was just beginning. In the aftermath, Rome tightened its grip on Britain, sure, but it also learned a valuable lesson about imperial arrogance, which actually led to more cautious governance in the long run. But here's the really fascinating part. The idea of Boudica has been completely transformed over time to fit whatever people needed her to be. To the Romans, she was a terrifying barbarian. But centuries later, the Victorians, who are busy building their own empire, turned her into a heroic British queen to create a national myth. The suffragettes saw her as a powerful woman fighting a man's world. And today, she's most often seen as a freedom fighter, a universal symbol of resistance against oppression. So, in the end, who was she? A hero fighting for her people's freedom? A villain who massacred tens of thousands of civilians? Or maybe she's a timeless warning about what happens when people are pushed beyond their breaking point. Her legacy is as complex and fiery as the revolt she led, and that is exactly why we're still telling her story.